One of the things we decided was really important in this symposium, aside from rigorous and lively discussion, was to actually create some space to show some of the work by the women who are going to be participating in the performance program as well, and to have an opportunity to learn about their processes and the ways that they think and what they inject into their art. And so I'm very pleased to present this panel called Signature Visions, Art, Tech, and Soul. And your moderator is Cathy Boyd from Cryptic and Sonica, and she's also spent some time talking to the women as well about the depth of their practice. And so I hand it over to you now, Cathy.
Good morning. I'm just going to recap exactly what this session is about, because I take no credit for this introduction. It is the text of Patty, and it's rather beautiful. Informed by curators' unique set of circumstances and experiences, the act of art making comes with signatures, with a style, a personality, and a meaning, sometimes explicit, sometimes not. Now we're at the point of evolution in digital arts, where the tools are no longer the star or the primary sensation in artworks. We can begin to consider the personal language of the author, details at the level of the self, and to locate the humanity and the soul in their work. So what influences manifest in their pieces? Where do they see themselves in their aesthetic inclinations? And how is the meaning constructed in non-narrative environments? Do we even need meaning in art, or do we just want to take people on an emotional journey? Today we have three very different artists with three very different backgrounds. Sabine Arathi trained in film and video, and through time, video art stole her heart, and editing is now really very much her vocabulary. We have Miriam Buescher, pianist, a degree in electric acoustic music, and now doing a PhD in the language between image and sound, and she hopes to create a new grammar, which we'll touch on later. A new Buescher language. And then we have Caddy Despian Demoulet, Push.1. I hope I've pronounced your name right. I forgot to ask you. Spot the Irish at work. Formerly a journalist and a presenter, self-taught technologist turned digital production effects designer, and now an interactive media artist. Each has created a truly unique and engaging and contrasting presentations in their work. And I've also asked them to raise questions about themselves, about what moments in their life might have changed their aesthetic, and where they see themselves closest in their work. I'm just going to give you a little example of some of the aesthetics, but I'm not saying who is who, but you will work that out through the session. So I'm Cathy Boyd. I'm artistic director and founder of Cryptic in Glasgow, and also founded the Sonica Festival in 2012. I thought for today it was important to sort of set my experience as an artist and curator and why I do the work and curate the work I do and what affected me in my life. So I grew up in Belfast during the Troubles in the 70s, and yeah, it was pretty ugly, and it was a complete invasion of privacy. There were soldiers, there were bombs, and all I knew going to any performance was literally political drama. In 1989, I planned my escape, actually, because I wanted to get out as quickly as possible, and I went to Glasgow to study, and it was then European Capital of Culture. And during that year, I discovered amazing work and a completely different way that you could tell a story and actually present work on stage. And there was many, many Québécois artists, from Laure Lepage, Les Du Monde, Carbon 14, Marie Chenard, the list is endless, as well as lots of other artists. But because of that introduction and what I'd left behind me, I chose, and I still can't ever curate political work. I very much want to I'll show you some images from the work I used to make. Now I very much focus on the Sonica Festival. But I wanted to make work which was about escapism, which was about beauty, and nothing about politics at all. So let's return to today's session. I would like to introduce Sabine Arathi to give her presentation. Sabrina was born in Quebec. She lives and works between Montreal and Paris. And she very much, at the early stage, after taking a MFA in film production at Concordia University in Montreal, she very much focuses on video synthesizers and video feedback. She now works very much across, I would say, the aesthetic of utopian architecture to painterly textures. But what's interesting about her, actually, is that she began her work on the internet. That's how she started actually showing her work and building her career. She's presented work at the Whitney Museum, the Museum of Using Image, and also at Atonal Festival. But I'll hand over to Sabina to introduce you to her work.
So thank you for this invitation. I'll have to speak quickly because we only have 15 minutes, and I'll talk on top of the videos I'm going to show you. But you can find everything online. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. So I will talk in some kind of a chronological order how my work has evolved through time, how my aesthetic also has evolved, and how I integrated new tools, and how this influences also my interest, my inspiration, etc. So I guess, yes, when I first started to be interested in video, I actually self-taught video synthesizer and video feedback. Here are some images of a workshop I did in Valparaiso. And just to show you a little bit the kind of tools that I started using back in 2010. And eventually I added more 3D animation and digital effects. Kind of in order to blur, the limits between analog and digital, and also make this kind of not really recognizable aesthetic. You're not sure it's from the past, from the future, and it's also a way for me to create a language. So I know, like, a lot when you do digital art, people ask you about the technique, and I think it is a very important part, but because it's part of a language you develop, but it's also important for me more that the piece in itself is kind of enjoyed as a painting, and I'm also very much like an aesthetic. I have an aesthetic approach, and from there emerge meanings. So I'm interested in all that video has to offer, if you want. Like, so I do print, live performances, installation, sculpture more recently. So I'm going to try to cover all this really quickly. I've started to do a project with Roger Télécrec called Le Révélateur, and together this project is really audiovisual, so I'm as part of the band as he is, if you want, even though I'm doing the visuals. So I was doing all of the concert, the album cover, etc. And this is an excerpt of the new video that is going to come out in a few weeks. And you can feel here the electric signal, but mixed also with, this kind of 3D and digital effect. So with this project, I really go more psychedelic, more pop. Like we really try to explore like how we would feel to live inside of a computer, and so for this project, it's also the music that is driving the project. And Roger is also doing all of the soundtracks for my personal videos, so which is completely a different approach. So here are just some examples of different performances. Like, I've collaborated with other musicians as well. I recently did a performance with Sunra Orchestra, which was pretty amazing. And for this show, I was just using video synthesizer, so completely, improvising on the music. So now I'm going to talk more about my video work, like single channel video, and how it evolved into different forms. So in 2011, I did this, I was working only with video feedback, and really, like, it was a discovery. It was like, for me, it's really an easy way to approach video, because it's really hands-on, and it's cheap way to do it. So it's all about experiments. So in that sense, my work is experimental in the sense that like I create this language based on a relation I have with my tools. And this video called Activated Memory was actually a picture from park in Montreal, which I saw as kind of an idealized forest, you know, like this perfect, this perfect vision of nature. So I was kind of trying to create this utopian, idealized version of reality. All the music is by Roger Craig. And then eventually I started to integrate, you know, more video synthesizer, but that's how I got into creating these kind of 3D spaces without yet using 3D animation, just by the use of perspective and color gradients. And I also started thinking about video as painting with light. So this is just an example of, so here you also feel the human touch, you know, like the movement you see is really my hand turning and creating these openings. So I was really driven into creating abstract architecture and started to be interested by corporate spaces, utopian and dystopian architecture. So some ways this is, you know, through making videos that I started to dig further this idea of architecture. So this is the first installation I made at the Museum of the Moving Image. So this is kind of inspired by hotel lobbies, but it's very abstract. Another installation I did here at the SAT, and this is where I started integrating prints and projecting on prints. It's a very simple technique again, but it makes these beautiful illusions of the image melting and creating just really nice effects. So this has been part of my practice, and I'm like also pushing further this idea of impossible architecture and landscape, inside, outside. Voila. So this is a video called Domestic Landscape Eclipse. So as I said, I like to explore all of the possibilities of videos. So this project has been a live performances, print with projection, and is also a single channel video. And it's a very contemplative piece. The music for this was from Andrea Jane Cornell, and so it's this it's also the mix of synthesizer and 3D, and it's you're not sure if it's a landscape, if you're inside or outside. So I think I already said that. So here's another project called Alpenglow, which is a print, and where you only see part of the image that is changing, like the landscape changed colors. Another installation I presented at Dolby in San Francisco. So really pushing, you know, the idea of the electricity into this 3D environment, and that's when I started also wanting like this idea of experimenting architecture through images, but also you know, in reality, if you want, in the physical reality. And so I created this sculpture based on the digital architecture that I created. So the video becomes an extension of the sculpture. This is a solo exhibition I did, which is kind of like the resume of a certain time of this, you know, certain span of work. This is an installation I did at the Never Apart, where actually the video becomes an extension of the room it is in. So I really like this idea that you actually watch a video outside from those windows, and it's part of the piece itself. So always this illusion of like this other space where you can kind of step into. And then eventually you know, creating architecture is really like a very formal and very strict kind of world, and I kind of wanted to free myself from all this structure at some point, and I just created these landscape and painterly landscape inspired by surrealism, like paintings, and so this is like a post-human world where some weird entities are emerging, and so I'll let this play a little bit. And with this project, I also started thinking more about this idea that not editing as much, but creating tableaus, like painting in motion, so that you can watch the video forever, like it's a loop, and you don't have to watch it all, like to free the viewer in some ways from a beginning and an end. And this is something I'm more and more interested in doing, this thin line between fixed images and video, moving images. So here is a series that I call Radiances, and this is really painting in motion. So in this case, the image is really subtly moving, so it's really just meant to have its own life, and you can watch it just as you would watch a painting. And I'm working now on integrating these videos inside a structure that, but with, you know, in plexiglass with video projection behind it. So it's like a, I hope will look like some kind of a hologram, but also like inside of these idealized reality, a little bit like the first video I showed. So it's almost like every project I do, I try to englobe every step of my work. So that's why I like the idea to show it in chronological order. So then I'm back to architecture. So I think this kind of are two different directions I'm taking in parallel right now. And I did this residency around Paris last year to actually explore the idea of the new town. So these are like suburbs of Paris that like were built in the 60s and 70s, where the architect could create a town from scratch, and this gave monumental projects, and there was this real like utopian idea of creating the perfect city, but in reality, like it became these kind of places where some of them are really dangerous because a lot of people are actually stuck in between in a enclosed city. So the model doesn't quite work. So it really encapsulates this idea of dystopia and utopia and this tension between both. And also, I'm also very interested in the virtual and the physical space. And it was really interesting for me to research about these architecture first and then go and visit them, because every time the impression was completely different, and then reintegrate what I've experienced physically into the virtual. So I took picture of some of the facades and added some video synthesizer inside of the architecture features, and kind of recreated a new architecture from the existing one and an impossible one. So and this was shown into an installation at Mirage Festival in Lyon this year. So it was really like creating, I wanted to recreate this idea of a path that you go through different buildings as if you were in a new town. So here is just a quick excerpt. of one of them. So this was like at Les Tours Ayo. And this will be adapted into live. That's what I'm going to present on Friday with Roger. We're going to do a live version of this project, which was quite challenging because it's very, how can I say, contemplative work. So I completely destroy all this architecture and remove them, remake them. So you can see that on Friday, if it's a success or not. And so I'm also, I'm working on this project that I'm going to show here at Elephant Gallery, just beside here. I'm going to do a solo exhibition, and the opening is September 20th, and I'm going to show also these sculptures, so this idea of recreating the 3D world, but with projection on top of these sculptures that are taken from the video. And finally, this is the last project I've been doing also that I'm going to show for this solo show. And mostly inspired by utopian architecture. Some of you may know, like Super Studio, and but like in this virtual world, like how architecture is being sketched, like it's a blueprint and then becomes real, then melt again, and always this idea of like an unreachable reality. So I'm gonna leave you with this short excerpt. The video is 10 minutes long, but this is kind of a resume of the video if you wish. Thank you. Thank you.
Merci.
We do the prochain slide. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take a seat? And we talk a little bit. Yeah, I saw Machine for Living, which is a fantastic work in Lyon. So I'm very curious what you do with that in a live performance, because I was very experiencing the work. That I really wanted to see it. I went back to see it on my own. I didn't want other people in the landscape with me, because it was such an extraordinary experience to just go through the architecture. Yeah, so I don't want to talk too much about it, because I think it's nice for people to see the performance tomorrow night without giving too much away. Thank you. The beauty of your work is the perfectionism that you aspire for. Every little detail is completely perfect. But in that last work you showed us, I'm curious, because your earlier work, you very much enable us to be, to relax, to really go on this meditative journey. And in that final work, you almost cut us off. You're playing with us, you're restricting how we're allowed in. Could you just elaborate for us a bit on the change, please?
Yeah, actually, I think that's part of the two direction I was talking about, with this idea of the moving painting in motion, where you just kind of dive into the image and like let yourself float. But I also have this, not obsession, but like this, it's important for me that like we can totally escape, if you want, into the work, but also be conscious of that you're watching, you know, a screen with a texture, and being conscious of the form. So it's like this idea of wanting to enter the piece, but also at some moment out of it. So that last piece, there are some moments like this that are really sharp and wakes you up, and some other moments that is just complete, you know, dreamy path into this world. So.
And that work you're showing within a cube setting, or it's just a screen? It's being projected?
The last one?
Yeah.
No, it's a single channel video on screen, yeah.
Okay. And talk a little bit, please, if there is a moment which has affected your aesthetic, whether it's when you were studying, what is the moment that influenced your aesthetic most in your life?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When, I guess, because it didn't affect my aesthetic, but when I finished school, film school, which was really, in those days, focused on film and like, you know, scratching film, cutting film, everything, I was interested by everything that came about this idea of the medium, being aware of it, but really I didn't want to work with film. And that's when I realized, you know what, video is so much more natural for me that like everything's changed like almost from day to night. Like, and that's also when I started to discover all these great pioneer video art, and those were my teachers. But in terms of my aesthetic over time, I think it's always evolving. You know, I'm trying to find new tools, and then those tools influence my work, and then parallel to that, I get inspired by architecture or different, you know, aspects. So it kind of is a language that I've been developing through time that gets more and more, hopefully, refined. Hopefully.
And obviously you started 2D, and now you're looking at architecture and Corbusier influencing your work. But you've talked about sculpture, so you're really going into the 3D. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting also the idea of a 3D printing, just because, again, it's the video signal that is being transformed into an object. And it's always this idea, you know, of like wanting to cross the screen, and like this ambiguity with the you know, virtual images that you almost can feel, and then you can actually take it out of the screen. So it's really like this idea of always of materializing light that I'm interested in.
Maybe we should open up to the floor if anybody has a question for Sabrina at this moment before we move on to the next presentation. Everybody is not awake yet. You need more coffee. Okay, yeah. I think there's a microphone for you, please. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, it's really beautiful what you are doing. What's it called? Application in the computer do you use? You use many probably. What do you use to do this? Like the 3D applications are.
Well,
And also synthesize.
yeah, like the video synthesizer, video feedback, and I mix 3D animation. I use Cinema 4D, a bit of After Effects, and editing software.
Just everything.
Sorry?
No, Cinema 4D.
Yeah, Cinema 4D.
It's cool.
Does that answer your question?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, there's another hand, a gentleman in the middle, please.
I'm the gentleman in the middle. Sorry. No, that's fine. It's great.
Sorry.
No, that's actually really good. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the presentation. I've loved your work for a long time. I was especially moved by your work with Barry Lynn, with Box Cutter. And I was wondering what led you to work with music artists before in relationships? Did they ask you? Do you ask them? And how do you, just a little bit about that process working through?
Yeah, I mean, I worked a lot with, actually, like my work with Roger, which Le Révélateur is really from the beginning when I started making videos. I also started this project with him, so this almost came naturally. And but then, yes, I collaborated with other musicians, with like Robert Aelo, for example, at MPAC, who invited me to do this residency. And I've collaborated with Soons, too, the Montreal band. I've toured with them. But yeah, mostly I'm lucky they invite me. So I also do a lot of music video, which I didn't talk about, but this is more of a way to, sometimes help with the rant. But also, music videos have been very formative for me at the beginning because music has been an inspiration forever. So, in video also, I didn't mention that, but it's interesting for me that, like, for example, video synthesizer have the same technologies than, you know, the modules of music, that it's based actually on the Moog synthesizer, the one I'm using. So it's exactly, you know, it comes from the same place for me. It's like electricity that is being transformed and manipulated, one into sound, one into visuals.
So I'm curious, because your background as an editor, and you talk about that being your vocabulary in a sense. When you're, if we take something like Machine for Living, are you starting there with the music and you're editing to that? Or how much is that generative?
When it's my personal work and it's Roger makes most of the music, as I said, actually we've changed a lot of the processes, but like for Machine for Living, he gave me banks of sounds that I edited myself on top of the image. But it's important for me that I don't know if it's important, but that's how I work, is that the images come first, and I find the rhythm myself through images. And so sounds comes for, it's almost like, I always find, I have this ideal of having this very neutral sound, the most neutral sound, which is really hard because every sound has a connotation, I find. So this is kind of what I've been working on. And sometimes I want that little color. Sometimes I want something a bit more kitsch or some more nostalgic. But most of the time I want those super neutral sounds. So yes, so I did the sound myself on top of the image in this case, yeah.
And how important is the emotional journey for you within your work?
I mean, emotion in my work, I think, I want to leave a lot of space to the viewer to interpret, as, you know, like as architecture, like you enter a room and it's either, if you've never been in there, you might find it cold, or you would hate it, or then if you go there a lot, then it starts to have this, I don't know, familiar place, and then you become to like it. So it's like all about projection in architecture, and I think that with video, it's a bit what I'm trying to create a space where the viewer can wander and project somehow its own. But I don't want to impose any clear emotions. More, I'm always, you know, interested by this ambiguity between, is it a space I'm happy to be in, or do I just want to like run away? Like, so yeah.
Thank you. We will open the floor at the end to further Q&A. So thank you, Sabine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is this working? No, I have to do this. Okay. So I don't have to stand at the podium. So next we have Miriam Buescher. Thank you. Miriam is inspired by natural phenomena. She merges very much the organic with the synthetic, excuse me. Her polymorphic work expresses the intimate dialogue between music, sound, and image. As I said earlier, classical pianist, pursuing electroacoustics, and her current PhD research is the video music composition, proposing a classification of image-sound relationships as a building towards an eventual grammar of the genre. She's exhibited her work at the Musée d'Art Moderne in Paris, as well as the Museum Contemporain in Strasbourg and the Centre Mexicain Musica des Arts de Morelia, Mexico. So thank you, Miriam, very much.
Thank you, thank you. Today, I will try to, I will not go like in my PhD stuff because it's really deep, but through my audiovisual work, and more specifically through the way that I work with matter, gesture, and meaning, I'm gonna try today to trace a line of what narrative can be in an abstract and musical context. So my starting point in my work is always the matter. I like to work with matter because I'm interested by the movement of matter, both oral and visual. I use different kind of matter in my work, like birds, hair, forest. But today I will focus on the most important one in my work. It's water. So if I want to work with movement of the matter, I need to capture them. So it's really, I always do both in the same time, music, sound, and video. So with my camera and my microphones, I capture movement, like here. It's the river, Kabir-Kuba River, near Quebec City. And it sounds like that. I don't know. And it looks like that. Whoop. I don't know. The video is not playing. Yes, it is. Oh, it's only on the computer. Sorry. So with those movements, I can then create musical gestures. And but what is a musical gesture in a, not like in an instrumental context with in pop music, or I don't know. For me, I like this definition of the composer Denis Mali. It corresponds to what I mean when I'm talking about gesture. A gesture is therefore an energy motion trajectory which excites the sounding body, creating spectromorphological life. From the viewpoint of both agent and watching listener, the musical gesture process is tactile and visual, as well as oral. I really like this idea of tactile, yeah, and it's really important in my work. So my work is composed of gestures that move forward together through time, and the technology becomes a tool to organize the matter through time and to create gestures. Adding effect and manipulating sound and image is a part of my creative process too. I will show you some extracts of my pieces, and you will see what I mean by creating gestures from movements and with a lot of digital manipulation. So like you said, it's all from water. All those movements come from my footage, and yeah. So meaning, for me, a meaning relates to the formal unfolding of the structure in my audiovisual work, and the unfolding of structure moment by moment is still what music and what audiovisuality is about. It is about time. And I think that the artist is able to create and reveal meaningful connections where we may not otherwise find them. Sounds and images of any source can be brought into dialogue with any other, creating layers of meaning. And implicitly or explicitly, the watching listener will make connections. Thank you.
Thank you. We can really see the water in your work.
Oh.
It's a marsh?
Yeah.
And I'm curious, do you film birds and hares much when you're making other works? I'm being naughty. What I'm curious about is some of those works you've used saxophone. You did another work with bass clarinet. Obviously,
yes.
your background is very much in music. So do all those works have a live musician, which you have then obviously processed?
Yeah, I really like to work with musicians and other composers, and I really like to make collaboration. And sometimes musicians can give me like some nice materials to work it. And yeah, I often collaborate with musicians.
Because what's really interesting with Reflect, you can really hear the textures and pitches that you're creating, the depth of the sound. But is that because you're mixing the processing of the live instrument with the electronics?
Yeah, I really mix both, yeah, always.
Is it very much depth?
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I don't want to use to say that SAT is the answer, because I always think that the artists of Montreal are incredibly fortunate to have SAT, but if you tour anywhere else in the world, you never get Dome or so many speakers as SAT. So what I want to ask is, with your work, how often then do you perform at other places with a 16-speaker or 24-speaker setup to really pick up in that quality of sound?
I had some experiences with with the dome of speakers or a lot of speakers, and I really like this idea to make it more immersive.
More.
It was your question,
yeah.
And but right now it is not one of my concern too much, yeah.
So to return to your PhD about the language and the grammar, I'm just curious, what are you hoping the result of that will be? And what year are you on? For what stage? Please.
Yeah, with my PhD, I hope to give more tools to composers who are doing stuff like me, audiovisual work, and just to talk about what we are doing and more understand what's going on when you mix together visual and music.
But what do you think is missing then in order for you to write that PhD?
Yeah.
So is there something in particular in the language that you feel in collaboration is missing that has affected you as an artist?
Yeah, I think so. We always work by like experimentations, and we try a lot of things, but we don't always understand what's going on, and yeah.
And is it a language that, especially for notation of music?
Yeah, maybe, yeah. yeah, because I'm like in faculty of music, and I'm musician first, and I'm doing video in the same way that I'm doing music. For me, it's like the same thing. It's not, but for me, it's the same thing.
It's interesting because a lot of musicians working in electronics. Oh, that's the duck. That's the timer. A lot of musicians working in the electronic field sometimes feel that when there are opportunities for residencies to be with certain festivals, and I'm also talking not just in the electronic scene, I'm talking much, much wider in the music genres, that sometimes there is this pressure to be able to notate, and many of them can't notate nor want to notate. So I was curious if your PhD language was actually going to address that issue, because you're always...
Maybe, I don't know, but I think so, yeah. I think so.
Okay.
I hope.
To open it up to the floor, if anybody has a question for Miriam. Yes, thank you.
This relates to Cathy's question too, a little follow-up. Are you creating a notation for visual shots, like a way to also track those as compositional elements, visual compositional elements?
Yeah. Sometimes I start with visual elements, and but it's really always. My starting point is always music, like what is musical in those elements, what is musical in the nature, what is musical in the world, I don't know.
But when you're making
yeah.
Do you sketch out, do you draw out a sequence of visual elements too? You do, okay.
Yeah. I do. I'm not sure to understand very well the question, sorry.
It's really just the comparison again between musical notation and then
yeah.
are you also making visual notation, that there's this relationship where you also write out in some kind of visual way?
It's not, in electroacoustic music we can write like scores, kind of scores, and I try, yes, to make like tools to be able to analyze audiovisual work, like so you can make visual representations of the music, like on a score, and you can write on it like what is the relationship with the images at this moment, at this moment, at this moment. Okay, they are together like that, and after that, like that, you can describe all the relationships with music. Yeah.
So do you actually storyboard then what you're wanting to create?
It's not a storyboard, but more like movements, all the movements that I want to have through time, so I can think about like it will be like that for 2 minutes, like this kind of movements, and after I will go in a kind of, I don't know, raining stuff with sounds, and after more like.
And then you start then with the music?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. To which you had the... I would be very curious for somebody to commission you to score for orchestra, who would then be processed live and to have these visuals. Would this be of interest to you?
If they...
Would this be of interest for someone to commission you to score you for orchestra, to have processed live?
I had some demands for that, this kind of, but I'm not really interested in for the moment.
But the classical world needs you as well, because their audiences are dying. We have all the good audiences. So you're kind of crucial for those big music halls, which have their greying audience. Any other questions from the floor? No, thank you very much, Miriam.
Thank you.
Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. So now we have Cathy, Desbian, Dumoulin, Push Stop 1. Cathy studied politics, economy, and was a journalist for 2.5 years and also presenter. And I'm very interested in how her curiosity and that sort of telling a story has affected her work. Self-taught, she went into post-production and visual effects industry for 10 years. And then in 2010, she started VJing as Push Stop 1, which she's going to explain a little bit about as well, using touch designer processing and Notch. But this is not a techie session. This is an aesthetic session, so I'm not going to talk too much about the coding aspect. Very much involved with the post-humanist movement, meticulous in the construction of complex narrative environments, engaging stories, and seeks to bring out the human in the process. So I now hand you over to Cathy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cathy, for this introduction. Thanks to MUTEC, especially Patty Schmidt. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very happy to be a part of this Keychange initiative. I think it's very important that we step out and we talk about our project and how we do it, because you're right, it's usually about tech, especially with me, because what I do is creative coding, visual programming, so I do visuals with coding, so it's really often related to tech stuff when I'm invited to do a presentation. And today I was actually quite charmed about the subject because I was asked to talk about me and not how I do things, and not like, oh, but what do you use? Or because, yeah, digital art is about technology, but it's humans behind, and this is something that is very important for me when people come and see a show that I do, that they feel that there's a human actually behind a computer trying to play with it. It's an instrument. I really try to treat my computer as a real collaborator, like if it was an instrument. And that's actually how I got into generative design and coding, because I wanted to be able to create my own software, my own system, to make sure that it shows that I'm actually having my two hands in it, and people can tell that I'm performing, that it's not somebody who hits play. Because I really love MUTEC, I really love the digital art world and the electronic art, but I find it often really cold. I find often that we don't feel the artists behind, and especially when we do abstract visuals, like what I do. This is the work that I presented last year at MUTEC in the dome of the SAT, Société des Arts Technologiques, which is just in front of here. I really like to work in dome venues. I will talk about it a little bit, because like Sabine Arathi, I am very inspired by architecture as well. This is other work. I presented it in past MUTECs, all made with generative design. As you can see, I don't use much color. That's part of my aesthetic. I really appreciate colors in general. I'm always fascinated by people like Sabine Arathi who have like this talent to be able to really use color in a way that is not like cheesy and annoying, because I find that often colors comes with an emotion. So if you show me a red, like no matter what, I'm gonna feel excited. If you show me red, I get excited. So I'm always a bit like, not sure if I'm gonna show red, because maybe that's not what I want people to feel in the end. I want people to actually have the freedom to think what they want about my work, and that's very important to me as well. I'm super pleased this year to present a work that now, because I've worked a lot in dome venues and immersive environments, and I was actually very inspired to do my next work, which is actually the opposite. I try to bring the digital inside the real world. And I thought it was very interesting to hear Sabrina earlier, because it seems that it's kind of like into the collective imagination of the world right now. I think a lot of people are kind of tired of like being stuck with devices, being stuck with a screen, with a phone, with like this machine that kind of separates us. What I like about MUTEC is that we step out of our apartment watching a screen, and we are together, and we are here to actually watch artists perform. And I was really hoping that this year I could actually bring the digital inside the world and to see it like as a creature, as something, you know, that you can watch that has some kind of a live form in the room that we can all share together. This work is called Membrane. It's going to be presented tonight at 10:30 downstairs if you want to watch it. I work with this audio artist called Wicklow, Michael Dean. I always work with musicians because unfortunately I don't have all those talents I wish I had. But I mostly specialize in visual. But you have to know that my work it's about audio. I do visuals that create audio. So in the sense, I'm also a musician. And the musician that works with me is going to create visual at the same time. So we're both audio-visual artists in the end, because we do it together. What we do is that we actually build our own systems that does both at the same time. And it sounds kind of like complicated, but in the end, it's very simple. It's just you're just gonna watch two persons having fun with technology. And yeah, I was a journalist before. This is weird. I know. How come I'm here now? I'm a very curious person. I'm here to talk about me. So I'm a lover. I'm a huge lover. I love life. There's so many things I wish I could do, but I had to choose at some point. And I thought that actually it's very interesting to study journalism because you study everything, and that's why I decided to go in this field. I quit the journalism to become a visual effects artist because I'm a kid, I'm a geek, obviously, and I wanted to do special effects. I wanted to do something that is supernatural. I wanted to step out of reality, and this is what I try to do every time I do a show. I try actually to give like special powers to people for an instant. I want them to forget about their phones, about their emails, about their jobs, or about I want them to actually like be like away for an instant and like, whoa, and experience something. But I'm gonna get there. Anyway, as you can see, I'm someone that tends to be a bit hyperactive, I would say. Intense, extreme. It's in my personality. So I had to learn, kind of in the hard way, when I was in my 20s, that I needed balance in my life to actually not go crazy. So it was the same in my art. When I started to do visuals, I was putting all the colors at the same time, putting all the stuff I could find, 3D. It was like a big mess. And I've learned that less is more. And this is now, everything that I do is very minimalist. I study minimalism a lot in many artists, but also in terms of like statement in life, I try to be balanced as much as I can. It takes a lot of discipline because, like I say, it's not in my nature to be minimalist. But I discovered that there's nothing more efficient than a line. There's nothing more efficient than a circle, a square. And when you work with technology, it's kind of a big challenge to create something that is not going to go out of fashion. Because when you work with technology, it's all about this new plugin that you're going to try, and it's going to create this crazy visual. And it looks super cool for 6 months. Next year, you look at it and you're like, that was so cheesy, you know? It's difficult, I find, when you use technology, because technologies go out of they go out of fashion after a while. They're not timeless. I think that the challenge is to create something that's gonna live for a while, that's gonna be nice for a while. And that's why I decided to choose minimalism in my art. It's minimalist, but it's also very parametrical, because using technology gives me special powers. I'm able to create like crazy architecture with just lines. It's all based with lines, but when you multiply them, when you instance them, it can create very complex structure, and that special power to me well, thank you. I was born in 1985, and I can use this technology to create this visual, because I think it's really beautiful and powerful. And this is really inspired by architecture, this work that you can see. Minimalism. There's one artist that I have to talk about, because this person really inspired me. It's a huge influence to me. Obviously, Ryuji Ikeda, Japanese artist. I think this guy is awesome because he didn't give many interviews, but when he does, it's very meaningful, because he's also into minimalism in his life. It's a statement as well in his life. And I think that it's also really nice that he's trying to show technology in his work, because there's something very important that I have to say that I didn't. I'm like, oh no, I forgot to tell you this. I'm obsessed with sound. I am totally obsessed with sound, and I'm obsessed of how sound looks. I think that sound looks amazing. If you look at samples, they are beautiful, they are gorgeous, and I think it's kind of impossible to beat this. So most of the things I do in visual are sounds. I'm just showing sounds. Of course, I'm creating like 3D shapes with it, and it's all about movement and animation. But in the end, if you come see my show, you're gonna see sound. That's what's going on, because sound is beautiful. And Ikeda has the same inspiration. For him, a server, a network is beautiful, and he's gonna show it in his work. And that's what I'm really, I identify myself to. I did a little homage to Ryuji Ikeda in my latest work at SAT. I referenced the work Test Pattern he did in 2008. In 2008. It was 10 years ago, and I just want to do this quick thing about Ryuji Ikeda. I saw him at Day for Night last year performing with his laptop, and it was a work that came from 10 years ago, and it was so gorgeous. It's timeless. What he does is timeless. It's going to be beautiful in 10 years because it's minimal, because it's the simple square, circles, lines, and I don't think that you can beat this. Less is more. It's natural, it's pure, and that's my ideology, I would say. There was another question about this panel, about like, is it possible to tell stories in an abstract, non-narrative environment? I think it is, and actually that's what I'm trying to do in every show. I'm really trying to tell a story. But look, of course I'm not telling like real stories about, oh, someone comes in the room and then, this is not what I do. But I try to create experiences. I try to think about how the person's gonna feel when they will be in the show. How does it start? What's the feeling that I wanna give at start? And then where does it go and how does it end? There is a storyboard in every show I do. It's not about improv. It's not about improv. I improv a little bit because I create interactive systems, so I'm able to improv on top of it. Thank God. That's why I do generative. But it is really storyboard, everything that I do. And it always starts with an intention, with an idea of how the people is going to feel in the room. And this year, I'm taking my project as an example. I'm just showing you quickly the mood board that I did before even getting into the work. I wanted to step out of reality. Like I said, I wanted to bring the digital inside the world, so I was inspired a lot by light artists, by people that use projection as light, and people that are actually trying to create like 3D shapes with light, what we call volumetric projection. It's a type of holographic new way of working with projection, and I was really inspired by that. That's what I wanted to do this year. And this is the work in progress in the residency that I did this summer for the work, Membrane. So you can tell, you know, the references are there for sure. And once you have the reference, like I said, I storyboard. So I really do storyboard. I try to take every sound that we're going to use and every visual, and I try to tell a story. So if you look at the screen now, you can see it starts with a waveforms. It gets more complex, and then it becomes organic, and then it's like soundscaping, and then it's like creature, and then it comes back to this natural form of sound, of just waveforms. So yes, there is a story in this sense, and for sure you don't hear the music, and I didn't want it to show you video because I was asked to actually talk about myself. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to explain to you how I see my work, how I see myself in this work. And because, like I said, I'm an excessive person, I had to learn that I need to restrict myself to actually be efficient in my life. And it's the same in my art. I try to restrict myself to very minimal lines, because I find that technology gives you all the opportunities. It's like wide open, it's infinite. You can do anything you want. So if you don't restrict yourself, it becomes kind of overwhelming. It's very difficult to create when you have all the tools, so I do it on purpose to make sure that what I do is consistent, and that is something that gives a lot of freedom to the public in the end to actually feel what they want, and for an instant step out of reality and have like special powers. So thanks for listening, and I hope I'll see you at the show tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy, for your very passionate presentation. I'm curious because you are very extreme and you love sound, but you've chosen to make it difficult for yourself by working on black and white and restricting. Talk about this, because I love the fact that you really restrict yourself.
Like I said, I just think that colors are not, they're not for me. I love colors. I think it's amazing when artists are able to actually work with colors. Like Sabine Arathi is just like one of the greatest examples I could use. I was so honored to be like part of a panel where she was. And, but me, colors for me have emotions, and I don't want to give emotions to people. I want them to feel a landscape, but I want to make sure that they really, in the end, decide if they're pissed, if they like it, or if they don't. And that's why I would make it with the parallel of electronic music. I like electronic music because there's no lyrics. When you hear music with lyrics, it's like telling me what I have to think about. That's what I like about electronic music. There's no lyrics. I can decide whatever I want about like what the song is supposed to talk about. So I want to leave it open. That's why I chose black and white mostly, yeah.
Yeah, because it's interesting. You don't want to dictate to them what emotion you want them to feel, but you're very clear if you look at your storyboard exactly what you want them to feel at every time.
On my side.
Completely controlled from your side.
It's completely controlled on my side. I'm a control freak. But I want to make sure that there's for sure some room for the people to really decide whatever they want to think about.
Yep. But also to just go back to something you said earlier about Rushikita's work or any other artist, you know, good work doesn't date.
I'm sorry?
Good work does not date, ever.
Exactly.
It stays,
yeah.
It actually becomes a classic in the future, like Rushikita, but I'm also curious of why you quit journalism and the restrictions it put on you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I just, like I said, I'm a lover. I'm a sensitive woman.
Hopefully a good lover.
Me, when I was a teenager, I wanted to change the world. You know, I was like, this world. So I thought that becoming a journalist, I would actually like have like some kind of a power to inform people so things would change. But in the end, that's not what happened. I was told to go into car accident and to interview people that lost their child. And I was actually like even like almost asked to do harassment with those people, to call their family, to call their friends, to get this interview, because that's what we talk about. Unfortunately, journalism is very dictated. You know, I was told what what to talk about. I wasn't free to talk about the subject or this. There was no freedom at all. I was basically just copying what people were telling me to say, and it's a business. So when I realized that it was a business, that it was about making money, I just decided that it wasn't for me anymore, and I decided to be an artist, because that's the other thing that I knew, because yes, I was doing art forever. Since I was a kid, I did multiple kind of art, but it wasn't an option for me to become an artist. I didn't think that it was possible to actually live with art, but I guess it is.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, I'm lucky.
In the
for now.
in the article that just came out, Derivative, that you kindly sent me, you talk about collaborating with your computer, and that your fascination with generative works and AI, you know, which is really exciting where we're at in the digital world. What's your hope with that? Talk about this, because it is exciting.
I think that I really like posthumanism. I don't know if you know a little bit about posthumanism, but it's the idea that humans gonna merge with technology. And like, people are scared about it. People are like, oh no, we're gonna kill the humans. As soon as an AI is gonna come in, like, the humans are going to die. Me, that's not what I believe. I believe that humans will stay there. We will be so happy with AI. Like, I'm sure that nothing bad's gonna happen. For me, that's the way I see it anyway. I trust humans. I trust that we're gonna do good things with it. And I just feel right now that we're kind of restricted with this iPhone that we carry everywhere, and that we send emails and stuff. I just know that, like, in the near future, it's gonna get much easier, because we're gonna be able to communicate very fast without any device. And it's a bit the same into the art world. Unfortunately, I'm spending a lot of my times right now learning new coding, like new language of coding. Okay, now I'm into shaders, I gotta learn shading, I have to watch a lot of tutorials, trying to learn. And sometimes I discover something in generative, and it's so incredible what you can do with it. If I wanted to explore just this little thing that I discovered, it would take me weeks, but I don't have time to explore everything. So I just like use it the way I discover it, and I don't go further. I think that's where AI is going to help me big time. It's going to be able to actually look and search for me much faster. And I'm really hoping that I will have some kind of like an AI assistant quite soon. That's gonna be it's gonna help me for sure to learn faster and to not be carried away with all those technicals, and I'll be actually more able to do art in the end, you know, instead of like being like trying to learn like new technologies. And because yes, I'm a geek. I like Star Wars, obviously. I'm a geek, of course, but no, in the end, if I could, I would just do art. I wouldn't be watching tutorials to learn coding. This is not what it's about, you know. That's about expressing myself, and I wish I could express myself more. And I think that with AI, I'll be able to actually express myself more. I don't think they are a threat at all.
You are one of very few female coders, along with Abel Correa. You started with your identity as Push one stop, yeah. Push one stop, sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your engagement with people and why you chose that identity? I think that's very important.
The push one stop?
Yeah.
The name?
Yeah, because it hid your identity, what we discussed earlier.
You mean your question is about me as a woman in the industry?
Yes.
Okay, I see. Yes, there's not many women into creative coding and visual programming. I wish there was more women in this industry. I think that it tends to come to the education that we used to have when we were younger. When I was young, girls were not encouraged much to go into this technical works. We were more encouraged to go with the social works or psychology or everything that was more related with humans, which is cool, but it wasn't about tech much, which is a bit sad, because in the end, if you look at the history, the first people to actually do coding were women during the war. So it's natural for us to code. And I just want to talk about it a little bit, because I don't think there's a difference between a women coder and a men coder. I'm sure that if I give my touch designer setup to a man, he's gonna understand the same way that I'm gonna understand his work. There's no difference in the end. And when I started to do visual as Push One Stop, why I decided to call myself Push One Stop, it comes from film, because I study film when I started to do VFX work. But I chose Push One Stop because nobody could know that I was a woman using that name. There was no photos of me anywhere, and nobody could know that it's a woman. So sometimes when I was booked, people were kind of surprised to see that it was a girl. They were, oh, you're Push One Stop. I was like, yeah, it's me. And they were surprised. They didn't know. And I just find it funny because right now I don't need to do this anymore. I'm happy to see that it already changed. There's no people that are surprised when they see a girl arriving. They're happy to see that it's a girl, and in the end, Push One Stop. But I just wanted to make sure that people are booking me because of my work and not because I'm a woman and because I'm a funny little, you know, like, joyful person. Like, that's not why I wanted to be booked. But I don't have to do this anymore. Thank God. and I really want to say congratulations to MUTEC to have 50-50 men and women artists. It's awesome. Bravo.
Maybe we can ask Sabine and Miriam to come to join us, and we can discuss a little bit together. We have to stop at 12:30? Yeah, okay, so we have to go fast. 8 minutes, let's go. So what I'm curious to ask you as artists is particularly, what do you need as artists now in the context of art, tech and soul? What is it? Because, you know, you're not allowed to talk about money because that's boring. But what is it actually that you need now?
Time.
Okay.
Really, time to just to make art. Like you said before, like we are always we are doing a lot of shows, a lot of we learn always. We are always this kind of You just need time to create, I think.
So that means create less work because you have more time, maybe. Cathy,
I would say the same, definitely time. I think it's the best answer you can give, yeah.
We can't all answer the same question, the same answer. Sabrina?
I just feel like I talked a lot already.
I think we all had the same answer, right?
Yeah. Do any of you want to talk about works which you've shown us, which were particularly close to you as artists?
I didn't understand the question.
Do you want to talk about any of your works in particular, which is particularly close to you?
Well, I mean, it's like what we were saying before. I think the project you're working on currently is always the one that is closer to you because it's you're very much involved in it, and it's an obsession. So like a lot of work I did. I don't know, 8 years ago, I still love very much, but it's more almost like a memory or just something nostalgic about it, or I remember those days, but it's to feel close to a work, I think you have, for me, it's when I'm doing it. After that, actually, you kind of give it, you know, to the world. It's not yours anymore, somehow.
And if you were, because I appreciate a lot of your work that you're making is you're spending time on your own, it's solitary, what you're doing. So if you were to ask each other a question about your work, what would that be? You see, artists don't spend enough time together. They're always on their own on a computer. There's a problem here. Now maybe we need to open to the floor because they don't have a question for each other. Take the mic. Thank you.
Were you all aware of each other's work before this panel? And
Yes.
what were your thoughts in terms of the comparison of your own work and applications of it?
Sabine, you understand? Sorry? You understand the question? So
She asked if we were aware of each other's work and what we think about each of us between us. So me, Sabine Arathi, it's been a while that I know her. I've watched many of her shows because I was so jealous about her video synthesizer. Because it's a great machine, and I just thought that she was using it in such a beautiful way and unique, and like I said about the way she worked with colors, I think it's very inspiring. And I was quite pleased to hear her talk today because I didn't know she was also inspired about mixed realities, about architecture, and for Miriam, I just find it so amazing to see that it's like the opposite. Like she's a musician and she's doing visual the same way that she does music. I think it's very beautiful. So for me, like those two women are great influence and inspiration. And that's what I like about MUTEC is that we're actually connecting each other, and we will inspire each other by being connected to each other. It's about like doing the network. Keychange, that's, I think the goal of it is for women to make connections, and I think it works, yeah.
Yeah, actually it's an interesting point because I feel like we all are evolving in kind of different milieu too. Like I was aware of both of you, and we live in the same city, but I think we're really in different but like listening to the talk of you two, I was like, but we're really interested by similar things. It's like like surprising at what point like we all mentioned this relationship with sound and images, but like in very different angles. But it's still you know, a sensibility that is really close. And yeah, I mean, it just makes sense, actually. We're all on the same panel. I find that it's a really interesting take on similar themes and how this can be explored in so many different ways and creative ways. And
I think it's interesting how you all also are getting bored by just the screen and you want something else. Going into a 3D world or with light or with sculpture. I think artists are really wanting more than that now. Yeah. Would you like to comment?
Yeah. I'm like I'm doing videos since like 4 or 5 years, so I'm new in this visual world. And when I discovered your work, like Push One Stop and Sabine Arathi, I was like, wow, I'm really a big fan, and yeah, really, I'm a fan. And I was like, I want to not to do the same thing, but I want to do that, like, and to make some amazing stuff, and I'm working on that still.
Have we another question from the floor?
Hi, it's hello. Thank you very much for sharing your work and your intimate thoughts. I was wondering, like, the three of you have like working with landscapes or inspired by architecture. So if there is something that have to do with Canada from your home, from your place, or like, I don't know, something, what's going on here that make you create this beautiful and amazing image. And another question, if you can survive or live doing what you are doing, like as a woman artist working in visuals. And
I think you have such a beautiful question about landscaping. Wow. Yes, of course. I think I am inspired by Canada. I spent, before doing Membrane, 3 weeks in BC in the mountains, actually. And what I do is soundscaping. I create actually landscapes and 3D shapes out of the sound. And I am inspired by nature a lot. I think it's very important for an artist to step out of his apartment and computer and get outside and get like this is inspiration that is very natural. About your question about living with art, I'm one of the lucky artists that actually lives with art, but I have to work for other artists. Fortunately and unfortunately, I cannot live only with my art. I have to work for bigger artists than me to actually make sure that I pay my bills in the end. Maybe one day I will be able to work only with my art, but right now I have to do 50-50. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, landscape has been also a very big influence, but I was thinking what kind of landscape I've portrayed in the past, and mostly when I'm traveling, I think I'm maybe more aware of it, but like I did the thing in Italy, but also the video I showed was parks in Montreal, and I think I'm interested also by the artificial landscape in some ways where there are human interaction in it, and Montreal has been so important also in terms of architecture for me to be inspired by, like just, I don't know, I love to walk in the night, and in Montreal I walk a lot because it's far, everything is far, but it's also it's nice to walk. It's quiet, and remember walking on Sherbrooke Street at night and looking at all those lobbies of like office buildings with these super sci-fi light and like artificial plants, and like, so really this is something that I really love about Montreal. I've seen there's a lot of these corporate places with these sci-fi ambience in it. So how, yeah, and for living from your work, I mean, you have to be, how do you say, a débrouillard, like, just, you know, stay open to any way you can actually do what you like and make a bit of money. Like I've survived this, like it's been a good few years now that I'm quite lucky to be able to work with what I can do best, which is video. But it takes many forms. Like sometimes you have commissions, sometimes you do make music videos, sometimes you write grants. We're like in Canada for this actually, and I don't really know, but somehow I make it.
Canada's very lucky. They doubled their culture budget recently, which is not what many other countries can say.
Yeah, the same thing. I think the landscape and the nature in Canada is awesome, and I'm really often in the countryside in Quebec. So I was in Gaspésie last week, and I had a new idea for my next project just because I was at the front of the ocean and mountains, and I was like, oh. I have my new piece in my head, like just to, and this access to nature is really great. We are lucky to have that here, and I live too from my heart, and but I have also grants for my studies, so I'm really lucky to have that. Yeah, and I need to. Do some stuff for other artists to live, yeah.
So we have 3 very lucky artists who can all live by their art, who make beautiful work. I want to thank Buescher, Cathy Boyd, and Sabine Arathi for their beautiful presentations, and also to thank Patty Schmidt and the MUTEC team for enabling this morning's sessions. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.